What if I told you Liam Neeson has been carrying a secret for 15 years? A promise he made to Natasha Richardson on her final night. A promise he never shared with anyone, not even his sons. And today, for the first time, he's breaking that silence. Stay with us until the very end, because what Liam reveals will not only change how you see their love story, it will leave you asking, what promises have we been too afraid to break? It was a small stage, barely lit, with just enough light to frame Liam Neeson sitting in a single chair. No dramatic backdrop, no flashing lights, just a simple photograph behind him. Natasha Richardson, smiling softly, caught forever in a candid moment. The room was filled with quiet anticipation, the kind that feels almost sacred, as if everyone there knew something important was about to happen, but didn't dare speak it aloud. Liam sat with his hands resting lightly on his lap, his shoulders slightly curved inward, as if the years had gently pressed him forward. His voice, when it came, wasn't the deep, booming sound people knew from the movies. It was softer, a little rough around the edges, shaped by time and sorrow. He spoke about Natasha, the woman the world adored, the actress who lit up every stage she touched, the mother who made their home a place of laughter and love. He spoke of her warmth, her sharp wit, the way she could disarm a room with nothing but a glance and a half smile. But underneath his words, something heavier stirred, something unsaid, something he hadn't yet unwrapped. He recalled the first time they met, not on a film set or at a glamorous Hollywood party, but in the quieter corners of theater life. She walked into his world like sunlight slipping through a cracked window, illuminating corners he hadn't even known were dark. Liam had always carried a weight inside him, a kind of slow-burning loneliness, but with Natasha, that weight softened. The audience leaned forward as Liam's words painted scenes of their life together. Early mornings making pancakes with their boys, Natasha dancing barefoot in the kitchen, scribbling notes on scripts, humming old songs she barely remembered. These were not the moments captured by tabloids or paparazzi. They were the quiet, unremarkable treasures that make up a life. And then came the shift. Liam's voice tightened just slightly as he began to recount the night everything changed. The accident, the hospital, the beeping monitors, the sterile white walls, the unbearable weight. He spoke not as a celebrity, not as an actor, but as a man who sat by his wife's bedside, holding her hand as time slipped away. He described how Natasha, even in those fragile moments, tried to ease his pain. She smiled through the haze, touched his arm, and said in a whisper only he could hear, made him promise something. And this was where Liam's voice grew quieter, where his eyes dropped for a moment to his hands. Because for 15 years, he had never told anyone what she asked, not their sons, not family, not friends. He had carried that promise like a stone in his chest, a private burden, a memory wrapped in layers of silence. And now tonight at 72, with the weight of time pressing in, Liam was ready to break that silence. But just as the room leaned in, just as the breath caught in every chest, Liam stopped. His voice, soft but clear, edged with something raw and unfamiliar. He looked out over the crowd, over the cameras, beyond the lights, and then he said, not as an actor reciting lines, not as a man performing for applause, but as a husband who had carried a secret for far too long. There's something no one knows, something from that final night, something she asked of me that changed everything. The room stayed utterly still. No one shifted, no one whispered. It was as if time itself had paused, waiting for Liam Neeson to pull back the veil on a story he had buried so deeply it had almost become part of his bones. His hands rested loosely on his knees now, his fingers slightly trembling, though his voice remained steady. He began to speak again, but this time the words came slower, as if each one had to be chosen with care. He took the audience back, not to the hospital bed, not yet, but to the years that led up to it. The golden days, the years when the house was filled with noise, when Natasha's laugh rang through the rooms like wind chimes in summer. He described the way she could pull him out of himself, how she'd drag him onto the dance floor at family parties, how she'd leave little love notes tucked into his script pages, how her smile could reset the worst of his days. They were partners, not just in marriage, but in survival, navigating fame, raising two boys, weathering storms they never saw coming. He admitted he often felt like the luckier one, the one who had somehow stumbled into a life brighter than he deserved. And he confessed that sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and Natasha lay sleeping beside him, he'd watch her breathe and feel a kind of aching gratitude, mixed with the fear that one day all of it might slip away. And then, one day, it did. He spoke of the accident, the skiing trip, the phone call, the rush to the hospital. But most of all, he spoke of that final night. He sat at her bedside, holding her hand, feeling her warmth fading under his fingers. And in those final moments, Natasha, with that same light that had drawn him in all those years ago, made a quiet request. She asked him not to tell their son she was afraid. She asked him to let them remember her as brave, joyful, unshaken. And Liam promised. For 15 years he kept that promise. He painted a picture for the boys and for himself of a woman who faced death without fear, who smiled until the very end. And maybe it was true in part, but it wasn't the whole truth. Because Natasha had been scared. She'd been afraid not for herself, but for them. Afraid they would carry the weight of her absence like a chain, afraid they would measure their lives by the hole she left behind. Liam's voice caught for a moment, just briefly, as he admitted that he had never spoken these words aloud, not even to his sons. He had carried them alone, thinking he was protecting them, thinking he was protecting her memory. But tonight, as he sat under the soft glow of the stage lights, surrounded by people who had loved her from afar, he realized something he had never admitted even to himself. He realized that silence is not always protection, that sometimes silence is a burden, that sometimes love needs to be spoken even when it's painful. The audience held their breath as Liam's eyes lifted slowly, his gaze steady, but heavy with years of unshed words. And then, with a voice edged in quiet anguish, he whispered, "But there's something else, something from that last night, something not even the boys know, something that changed the way I understand love, and I've never told anyone." The air in the room felt impossibly dense, as if every breath was woven into Liam Neeson's story, as if the entire audience was holding still for fear of missing even a heartbeat of what was to come. Liam sat forward slightly, his hands clasped loosely, his eyes shimmering under the lights, but not with tears. No, it was something deeper, something worn thin by the years, something that carried the weight of long-held memory. He began to speak again, softer now, as though addressing not the crowd, not the cameras, but Natasha herself. After Natasha passed, Liam found a small leather-bound journal tucked away in one of her drawers. He had never seen it before. It wasn't a diary she kept regularly, just occasional entries, fragments of thoughts, private confessions she had written only for herself. He had never read it aloud to anyone, until now. He took a slow, steadying breath and, without ceremony, began to share a passage. Natasha had written about love, not the grand, sweeping romance the world saw, but the small, quiet love that happened when no one was watching. She wrote about how Liam's presence steadied her, how even on the hardest days she felt anchored just knowing he was there. She wrote about her fears too, not of death itself, but of leaving too soon, of not giving enough, of not making her mark on their children's hearts. As Liam read her words, his voice remained steady, but there was a rawness under the surface, a thread of emotion pulling taut with every line. He spoke of the nights he sat awake, long after the boys were asleep, holding that journal in his hands, feeling the ache of her absence like a second skin. He confessed that, for years, he believed he was being strong by keeping silent, by carrying her final request like a shield, by telling their sons only half the truth. But over time, he came to understand that love unspoken becomes something else. It becomes silence. It becomes distance. It becomes a shadow where light should have been. Tonight, at 72, Liam realized he was done hiding behind silence. He looked up, his eyes steady, his voice sure. He spoke directly, not just to the audience, but to his sons, wherever they were. He wanted them to know that their mother had been brave, yes, but she had also been afraid. And that was not weakness. That was love. That was the fierce, aching love of a woman who wanted more time, who wanted to give more, be more, stay longer. He smiled softly as he said, "I thought I was protecting you by keeping that part hidden, but today I see you deserved the whole truth." The room sat in reverent silence, a stillness that was almost holy. And then Liam's voice dropped lower, edged with something raw. He spoke of one last moment, one he had never told anyone. In those final minutes, as Natasha's hand lay in his, she had whispered something. He hadn't shared it because, for 15 years, it had been his alone, a sacred memory he held close. But tonight, he was ready to release it. She had said simply, "Promise me you'll keep living." Liam paused, his eyes closing briefly as if feeling her presence even now. He admitted that for a long time he didn't know if he had kept that promise. He moved through life, yes, he worked, he smiled, he played the part, but had he truly lived? Tonight, under the soft lights, with Natasha's memory shining all around him, he realized he was still carrying her with him, still honoring her not by staying silent, but by speaking her truth. He turned his gaze gently to the camera, his voice tender but sure. "And that's why I'm here," he said. "To tell you, my sons, the world, anyone who needs to hear it, your mother was everything. She was light, she was love, she was fear, she was courage. And she loved you more than anything, with a depth I could never replace. And she wanted me, all of us, to keep living." For a moment, the studio seemed to hold its breath, suspended in something weightless, something real. Liam smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes not from joy, but from release. And then, with a quiet strength, he whispered, "I'm ready. Ready to live. Ready to let go. Ready to carry her memory forward, not as a weight, but as a light." But just as he leaned back, as the room seemed to settle, Liam's eyes flickered with something new, a quiet glint, a soft spark, because something had happened recently, something that had reminded him that love doesn't end, even when life does. And as the light softened, Liam leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering once more, and said, "There's one more thing I haven't told you. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit like, subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that love never really ends. And in the comments, tell us, what's one truth you've been carrying that you wish you had the courage to say out loud? We'll be reading every single one.